Okay, so let's bring straight out the next startup. It's Fluidinfo, fluidinfo.com. It's Terry Jones and Ben Siskovic. Round of applause for them.
Someone has to turn on the mic. The mic's on.
I think you're on.
FluidDB gives us all a new way to work with information. And it's so simple and natural that it seems revolutionary. And today I'm going to show you how it can change the world. Let's start with Wikipedia. The world of encyclopedias was rigid, very tightly controlled, and very carefully organized. And Wikipedia came along and turned that whole thing upside down by providing a shared writable web space. Even today, that idea seems like a joke, but it worked. So what about databases? They're also rigid, tightly controlled, carefully organized. So the idea that someone could build a shared database for applications where any application could come along and add any information to anything, that would be totally crazy, right? It couldn't possibly work. But that's exactly what FluidDB is. It's a shared database for applications. So imagine a world in which applications that had related data no longer were forced to store it into unrelated databases. I'm going to show you how that could work by showing you what happens when three related but independent applications all store data into FluidDB. The first one is Tickery. You can enter the names of 2 Twitter users, click on Go, and you can see who they follow in common. You can do more interesting things on the Intermediate tab. For example, who are John Borthwick and Andy Weissman of BetaWorks both following that Mike Arrington is not following? Kind of interesting. Now, if Tickery was a normal web app with a normal database, that would be the end of the presentation. But because it stores data into FluidDB, it's just the beginning. Let's have a look at another app. This is called TunkRank. A TunkRank is a numeric measure of a Twitter user's influence. It's just a number. We're looking at Hillary Mason, whose TunkRank is 42. Now, TunkRank, in a traditional setup, would store its own scores into its own database with its own API. But this is information about Twitter users. So wouldn't it make more sense for that information to be stored alongside other Twitter data? Twitter won't let you do that, but FluidDB will. And as a result, we can do queries on FluidDB to search for people by influence. So I can do a query where I say, who are the influential people that John Borthwick and Andy Weissman are following that I'm not following? And I get a bunch of interesting results. That kind of operation, where I'm combining data from 2 different databases, is very difficult in the normal world, but when the information is in the same place, it becomes trivial. And it only gets richer. Let's see a third app now. This one is called We Met At, and we wrote it for Techcrunch Disrupt. It took a couple of hours. You enter a Twitter username, you see their followers, and then you can click to indicate people that you've met in real life. And We Met At stores its data into FluidDB as well. So that makes the following kind of thing possible. Imagine John Borthwick walking across town towards Techcrunch Disrupt. And he's thinking to himself, I wonder if Terry could introduce me to any of the influential people that I follow on Twitter that I haven't met yet. That would be kind of cool. And you can do that query, and it's trivial. Here's the result. There's only 4 people. Robert Scoble, are you here? Here's Robert Scoble. John Borthwick, are you here? He's over here. You guys stand up. You should meet each other. Just think for a second. Let's just pause for a millisecond. Think about what I just did. I've combined data in an unanticipated way from 3 independent but related applications. And those applications are not aware of each other. They have no knowledge of each other. Now, that, in a nutshell, is a revolution in data. Because those applications are doing something completely natural, which is they're choosing to store their information into a place that makes it more valuable because it's more useful. And none of them had to ask permission to put that information into FluidDB. That's a revolution in data. Let's dig in a little bit further to the New York startup financing scene. Here are all the people that are followed by either John or Andy. There's 777 of them. And we're now going to filter it down quite severely by only looking at people who are also followed by Chris Dixon and Joshua Schachter and some people from RRE and IA Ventures and Andrew O'Shea. We get down to 13 people, and if I wanted to filter those 13 people, and I was interested just to know who the entrepreneurs were, Techcrunch could take some information out of Crunchbase, let's say a Crunchbase entrepreneur tag. They could put it into FluidDB, and when we do a search, we wind up with one person, and guess what? That was me. It's not a coincidence. The reason is that Fluidinfo has just been funded by all of those folks in a round that closed on Wednesday. Now, I want to take a step back and think of the bigger picture, because everything I just showed you was just examples. But FluidDB is not about Twitter users. In fact, it's not about anything. It's about everything. You know, barcodes, music, locations, people, email addresses, IP addresses, the whole lot. FluidDB gives you a shared writable object for everything. In other words, it's a platform for the web of things. And I want to conclude with a few remarks on the future of data. This is something I've been thinking about for about 12 years. The future of data is a writable future. It's one in which any person or any application can come along and add information to anything without asking for permission. The future of data is one in which data is social, where information that is related lives in the same place. And it's a future where our data, the final word on our data, is not in the hands of applications. It's also a future that 3 years ago I sold this apartment in order to have a go at building. And best of all, it's a future that FluidDB is beginning to make available to us all today. Thank you.